So welcome to a talk about leadership and team environment. Our Kelley alumnus, Patrick Decker, learned a lot about this when he engaged his company Xylem in efforts to save the Thai soccer team. Patrick is a native from Southern Indiana, an 87 Kelley grad. He started his career at Price Waterhouse, worked several years for Bristol Myers, and actually did an international jaunt for about 9 years in Asia and Latin America. He had several leadership roles at Tyco International before becoming president and CEO of Harsco Corporation. He's been president and CEO of Xylem since 2014. Patrick has become increasingly involved in the Kelley family. He joined the Dean's Council in 2014. And just to give you an example of Patrick actually becoming involved hands-on, he was at a Dean's Council meeting, and they said, you know what, we're having trouble placing some of our MBA students for internships. So Patrick left, went back to work, and within a couple of weeks, he hired more than 13 interns for that coming summer. This was in April. So it gives you an idea of the hands-on that Patrick's involved at Kelley. But he's also gives his time monetarily. He supported a couple of rooms in the Krebs Center and is also supporting study abroad scholarships. So Patrick realizes that it takes a village, and we're thrilled to have him as part of our village. He's going to talk about the Thai experience. He's also going to kind of share some information on Xylem. I just want to say Patrick is humble. He has a vision, and he has the strength to harness those qualities into good. With that, Decker.
Well, that is. I can assure you that is way too generous, and you'll determine that after about an hour here. Thank God we have free pizza. So I hope you all get more than your fair share of free pizza. It always brings a crowd. Thanks for coming out and having the interest to talk about leadership. I think that as I look around this room, I think every one of you are destined to be leaders, and you learn a lot of those qualities at every stage along the way of your life. You're all going to lead in some way. It doesn't matter what your title is. It's what role you play in a broader team. And part of my story, my major takeaway that I want you to have here today is this is not about me giving you a showpiece on Xylem, which happens to be the company that I lead, which is a global water technology company. Even when we're dealing with water-related disasters, it's understanding, no matter how big you think you might be or your company is, what is your role as part of a broader team and a broader relief effort, and the humility and authenticity required to be able to do that. And so what I'm going to do is I've got a handful of slides here. I do want to start off with a little bit of who we are as a company, just to set context. But then I'll break up my monologue here with a couple of videos that hopefully you'll find informative and entertaining. So who are we as Xylem? We are the largest global water technology company in the world. We are not a household name. Although I do have a couple of folks here in the room that would know what Xylem even means. So Xylem is the Greek derivative of a word that is the tissue that transports water from the roots to the leaves of a plant. That's Xylem. It's a biological term. We chose that term several years ago when these businesses were being spun out of a larger conglomerate. And the theme was very fitting because we really are about solving the biggest water challenges around the world. We operate in more than 150 countries around the world. We have about 17,000 colleagues as part of the family. We're a very global organization with a number of big, powerful, market-leading brands. What I would say here is that as large or small as you may think that we are only about 7 years old as a company, as Xylem. And a big part of our role in life is to create more awareness of the big water challenges that are facing the planet. And I'm going to come back to what those are in a moment and how we're trying to play a role as thought leader in that space. Our tagline is "Let's solve water." But what I always say is remove the apostrophe, and what it means is let us solve water. There is no one company, there is no one team that is going to be able to tackle the water challenges that I will outline for you here in a moment. But we certainly have a role to play. And what I can say is the 16,993 colleagues on my team as of last Friday, they are all very, very passionate and excited about the cause of what we do as a company. So, to talk about what are the big challenges facing water. Many of you may be familiar with what was called the Sustainable Development Goals that came out of the UN Climate Accords in Paris a couple years ago. There are 17 of them. Well, one of them is specifically to make sure that everyone on the planet has access to safe and efficient water supply. But the reality is, and I would encourage each of you to go out and Google this to see what the other 16 are, because you cannot solve any of the other challenges without solving the water challenge. The increased demand for energy to produce food places demand on water. The production of food places demand on water. One of the biggest challenges that cities and communities have right now is getting access to safe water supplies. It used to be that I would stand up here and I would say, by 2050, 25%, this is the UN and World Economic Forum reports, that 25% of the world's population will not have access to clean, safe drinking water. And that is not just in the developing world, that is in the US as well. But people's eyes would glaze over. 2050, oh, we got plenty of time. Let me change the narrative. By the time that every one of you as students are my age, we're there. That is not a long time, I can assure you. There are plenty of people in this room that look like me, age-wise, and I can assure you that it was not long ago that I was sitting where you are, thinking with all the hopes and fears and anxieties that you do. 30 years is not a long time. And so a big part of our role here is to create awareness of this, because there are solutions to our problems. And I'll walk you through a little bit of that. But, you know, there's the business premise of what we do. We are listed on the New York Stock Exchange, so the business students here fully understand that I, as a CEO, you know, my first charge is I have to create shareholder value, okay? Important, but blah, 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 okay? A lot of companies do that. We could be making widgets, and I would still have to turn a profit for shareholders. That's economic value. And I'm very focused on creating economic value for a lot of good reasons. But at Xylem, we are one of the few companies that are equally as focused on how do we create social value. Not just because we are a water company and our business is good for the planet, but because culturally, with all the stakeholders that we have, whether it be my colleagues that I'm trying to recruit, whether it be customers, whether it be political leaders, or the broader community, the community needs companies to have a shared purpose with them to do well by doing good. So a lot of what we do in Xylem with our people, and you hear I don't call them employees, they're my colleagues, because everybody's role in this company is important. They're just different. So driving engagement of our colleagues is really important. And I'm going to roll a video here. What you see up here on the slides is a handful of things that we do. They won't all be covered in the video. One of the things that we're most excited about is the work that we do with youth. And we are the 22nd year in a row of sponsoring the Stockholm Junior Water Prize, which is basically the Nobel Prize for water, but for teenagers between the age of 13 and 18. And you see the two Singaporean young gentlemen here below, standing with the Crown Princess of Sweden. I'm at this gala event every year. It's a worldwide competition. 42 countries compete. You have to win your national competition to go there. The winner, what these kids work on is not a science fair project. The innovations they're coming up with are mind-blowing. And if you're interested, it's easy to go find it. Just either Google our homepage at Xylem or go look for the Stockholm Junior Water Prize, and you'll see all the projects that they have submitted and what these kids came up with, which is now being adopted by the biggest and most progressive water technology company in the world in terms of the utility, is in Singapore. Singapore is the most advanced in the world. They're actually adopting the innovation that these 15-year-old boys came up with over the last year to further solve the water challenges in Singapore. Now I'm going to roll a video here very quickly that outlines kind of our social value efforts here within Xylem.
We are a company whose innovations, technology, and know-how are all geared towards a singular goal: helping our customers solve one of the world's greatest resources. With such a purpose, why would we need to do any more than that? Because the same spirit of respect, responsibility, integrity, and creativity that makes us invaluable to our customers is even more valuable to communities in need around the world and those where we live and work every day. Through our corporate citizenship initiative, Xylem Watermark, we provide safe water resources to remote villages in the Philippines and India, protect water resources in the rural areas of China and Brazil, educate children from Cambodia to Colombia about water, and work with local nonprofits and NGOs to help solve local water issues. We do all of this so people everywhere have a better chance at living healthy, prosperous, and sustainable lives. But none of these profound changes happen on their own. First, it requires great partners, and we have the best. But the most vital component to making a difference is the collective action of our people. The power and passion of more than 16,500 employees is enough to change the world. So when we volunteer to put our hands and our feet and our hearts and our minds into action, we help Haiti,
The war is just watch away.
Houston, and Puerto Rico recover. We make rivers in Germany and North Carolina cleaner, and our neighbors wiser. We give children a chance at a better future. And we come to understand why it is we do what we do.
Thanks to this donation, our community is going to be able to have water.
It's very difficult to comprehend, but it's massive for these guys, massive for them.
In 2016, we made a bold proclamation. Xylem colleagues would dedicate 100,000 hours of time to water-related volunteer activities by the end of 2018. And we're well on our way to meeting that goal. Xylem, let's solve water.
Now what do I do, Diane?
And just close that,
Close out?
go down to the very bottom,
Yeah.
the middle left.
Logo Maker. You can create a professional logo for your brand. Go to Wix.com Logo Maker and get a memorable logo designed just for you, based on your business name, your industry, and your style. Show the Logo Maker which designs you like, and you'll get a variety.
We are a company whose innovations, technology, and know-how are all geared towards a singular goal.
Couple of pages up.
There you go. Okay, so that's a little bit about Xylem in terms of what we do around the social value. I want to shift gears now and talk about some of the other things that we've been doing. It really starts with the Thai cave rescues. So, is there anybody? I guess how many people here in the room are generally familiar with the Thai cave situation? Pretty good coverage? Okay, good. So what I thought I would do, I'm not going to bore you with a lot of the generic stuff. What I thought I would do is before I go here, is I really want to tell you the story behind the story and kind of what was going on behind the scenes and how things developed here. But I do have, again, another video here that I should probably roll again in advance. Go ahead and do that. This is scary, but okay.
We begin in Thailand and that dramatic and heart-wrenching rescue mission underway in a cave system on the country's northern border.
More than 6,000 people have been made homeless because of the flooding that was unleashed by this dam bursting.
The quake struck the north of the tourist island of Lombok at about 6:45 p.m. local time.
A third more rainfall than usual has fallen this season with devastating effects.
From typhoons and tsunamis to myriad natural and man-made catastrophes, disasters are a condition of living on our dynamic planet. Most often, these disasters first manifest through water, too much in the wrong place or at the wrong time, or no access to clean water for survivors, a critical challenge for relief efforts. Xylem is meeting this challenge head-on. When we say let's solve water, it means bringing our water experts and resources to bear to provide relief and support for people and communities stricken by tragedy. Just look at a few very recent examples.
As
It's been 3 days since Thai authorities and cave diving experts found the 12 missing boys and their coach deep inside the Tamlong cave in Chiang Rai province. Now, the search has been turned into a rescue operation, which is extremely difficult because of the monsoon rain and the rising water levels.
Water technology company Xylem has provided technical experts for the recovery effort. We're joined now by their global CEO, Patrick Decker. Welcome, Patrick. Thanks for joining us today. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing on the ground in Thailand.
Looking at from the point the boys were actually identified to all the great work leading to the clearance of the cave, we have 4 experts from the US, UK, Singapore, and Thailand on ground. They've been working with the authorities over the past several days to help optimize the configuration of the pumps that were already in place there. So in doing so, we were able to significantly increase the flow capacity of those pumps, clearing out the first 3 chambers, which actually allowed for the extraction to begin yesterday.
We do have breaking news at this hour of the best possible variety to bring to you. All 12 boys, every child from that soccer team has been rescued from that flooded cave in Thailand after 18 days.
The reports still emerging from this landlocked country in East Asia, where a hydroelectric dam still under construction has collapsed, and in the process it has unleashed a flood of water on surrounding villages.
With clean drinking water critical to the welfare of flood survivors, Xylem dispatched volunteers to work with its local distributors and its NGO partner, Planet Water, to build water towers that can filter, treat, and store water for drinking in support of schools and a health center.
In the past few weeks, 3 big earthquakes have hit Lombok. It's estimated that up to 90% of buildings on Lombok are now either totally destroyed or seriously damaged. The earthquakes have left more than 150,000 people homeless, as there are about 20,000 who still need medical help.
In conjunction with Planet Water, Xylem swung into action, quickly deploying water filtration tower projects and an aquapod to provide clean drinking water for thousands of people living in relocation camps.
Rain comes to Kerala every year. Not like this. People are walking miles to safety through what officials say are the worst floods for a century.
Just 2 months after assisting in the Thai cave rescue, the same team of Xylem dewatering experts set up huge water pumps that can operate independent of the electric power grid to help remove floodwaters, aiding the recovery of waterlogged schools and fields. Each year, millions of lives are devastated by natural and man-made disasters, many involving water. Since 2008, Xylem and our employees have displayed a deep commitment to disaster relief and risk reduction, working with countries, communities, and global NGOs to deliver the means of securing clean water and helping to restore critical infrastructure in the aftermath of disaster. It's one more way that Xylem works to solve water.
See how quick we study it. So before I talk about the Thai cave rescue, the reason I show that video is because
Hi, I'm Michelle, and these are my kids, Red, Luke, and Charlie. And today we're going to go over 10 simple steps that you can do with your family to get more prepared for an emergency.
maybe I'm not a quick study.
This is a great thing to do with your family one evening. You can sit down for about an hour or 2, and you'll come out on the other side even more prepared.
The good news is that's the last video. So the reason I show the video is because the message there is that we talk about the importance of resilience of our infrastructure to natural disaster and water. It's one of the biggest challenges facing the world right now, beyond water scarcity. This is not just happening in developing countries. We were actively involved, obviously, in the hurricane activities in the Carolinas, and it's happening right now. We're seeing this continued increase in major storm activity, and so we just think we have a big role to play there in helping address that as a company. Turning to the Thai cave rescue, so let me just tell the story, and then I'll give you some of my learnings from this, and I'd love to just open it up for questions about that or anything else that may be on your mind. So I was on my way to Singapore we have a a biannual global water conference. It's the biggest water conference in the world in Singapore. And so my wife, who happens to be Thai, was there ahead of me in Bangkok. And so I was going to swing through, spend a few days of relaxation with her before heading on to Singapore. And when I left, was the first day that they had left New York, was the first day they had discovered that the boys had gone to the cave and they weren't sure whether they were in there or where they were. So by the time I landed in Bangkok, a day later, the news broke obviously around the world that the boys had been discovered. And everybody was exuberant at that point in time. But I can assure you on the ground there in Thailand, the general feeling was, is it better to have found them and not get them out, but at least know what the conclusion was, or not find them at all? It was that dire at that point in time in terms of what people thought was going to be possible, punctuated when we had the loss of the Thai diver that went in, the Thai Navy SEAL who went in and couldn't make it out. And that elevated the kind of sobriety of the conversation at that point in time. Now, I'm sitting in the hotel room with my wife, and I'm seeing the video footage around the clock of water coming out of the cave, and basically, 6-inch diameter PVC pipe, kind of blue pipe, that in and of itself, I can see that I don't know how much water's in that cave, but that's going to take forever at that rate. And so immediately I thought there's got to be a way that we as Xylem, that being one of our businesses, not for profit, but get involved in finding a way to help them. Well, as you can appreciate, the governor of Chiang Rai, who was the gentleman who had absolute authority and power given to him by the prime minister to make the decisions, was being overwhelmed by companies offering their services, some which remain nameless, advertising it, that they were trying to be helpful there. And quite frankly, I couldn't get through to him. And so the U.S. Embassy was trying to get involved, couldn't get any action there. And it so happened that a friend of mine that I've made a friendship with over the last period of time was a retired general in the Thai military. And so he happened to know the governor in Chiang Rai. And he reached out to him and said, we have this company, they get expertise, they do pumping, this is what they do. And even then the governor said, we have plenty of pumps, we have 20 of them sitting inside the cave right now, but we don't have enough electricity to run more than 5 of them. And so we don't need anything else. So I told the general, I said, I'm not offering pumps. We'll bring in pumps if we need to. I want to bring in the expertise around the pumps, and we'll work with what you've got. So he was able, this was on the Thursday before the weekend they began the recovery efforts, or the rescue. And I get a phone call from the general saying, you need to call the governor in 5 minutes. He'll give you 5 minutes. And you're on your own trying to convince him because he doesn't think he needs the help. So I get the governor on the phone, and I could tell he was very disheveled. He was very stressed out at that point in time. They had lost the Navy SEAL from Thailand the day before. And so he starts off telling me what they don't need. And I said, I understand that, but I'm not offering you pumps. I said, I've already had 2 people on the ground from Thailand and Singapore that went into the cave on their own, and we just need to go in there, give us a few hours. And he continued to kind of hem and haw, and I said, finally, okay, we were involved also in the Chilean mining rescue of several years ago. We dewatered the mine. And when he heard that, you could tell the whole mood shifted along the way. And he said, well, how much time do you need? And I said, I need 2 hours tomorrow. How many people? I said, 5. Where are they coming from? And I said, 2 from Singapore, 1 here in Thailand, 1 from Philadelphia, and 1 from London. And he said, well, how long will it take them to get there? I said, they're already here. Well, why are they here? I said, they're already in Chiang Rai. I said, why are they in Chiang Rai? I said, because whether or not you were going to allow us to come in, I wanted to at least make sure that we had our people in position at the right time, because it's the right thing to do. And if we were never going to be needed, it's a throwaway cost. But at least we knew, again, first lesson in leadership, is we knew that there was at least a possibility that we could make a difference. Whether we were ever given a chance, I would not have been able to have felt good about myself or slept well, nor would people in my company, which is going to be part of the story. At this point in time, nobody in my company even knows that we're on the ground over there, even doing anything. And the reason for that was because part of leadership also is not ratcheting up the expectations of your team or your organization only to let them be defeated when they don't hear a good outcome or a bad outcome. And I didn't want to hype, and so I said, look, we will, when there's time for us to say something, we will say something. So anyway, on Friday, we sent our 5 guys in. They spent 2 hours working with the team on the ground in the cave and gave them recommendations on what they could do. They reconfigured the electrical setup. They reconfigured the way the pumps were set up. And beginning on Saturday morning, when the recommendations were being put in place, between Saturday morning and Sunday morning about 6 a.m., we had increased the flow rates of the pump by about 40%. Now this diagram here, many of you probably saw this time and time again on TV, but on the right side is the mouth of the cave. And all the way here on the far left, 2.5 miles in from the entrance is what's called Pattaya Beach. And this was the rock formation where they found the boys together, hovered around their coach there. Now, at the time that our guys got there, there was water filled all the way to the very top, all the way back to, you'll see just right where it says Pattaya Beach, there's some water on the bottom there. That was where the water had stopped, but everything else was completely full. And they were running out of oxygen at that point. They had been in, at this stage, they'd been in 11 days. They were obviously suffering from hypothermia and all the other ills, no food, etc. So the governor knows that they're running out of oxygen. By Sunday morning, we have drained all the way back to where you see that little bottom there where it says, again, that pool right side of Pattaya Beach. That long chamber there, it's deceiving. From that one bottom on the left point to where it says narrow flooded passage, that is a full kilometer in length. And going in on Saturday, the water was all the way to the top of that. So what that would have meant was every boy had 2 seals that were assigned to him to get him out. At that point, it was too dangerous because the seals themselves would have had to have been swimming under the water, pulling the boy along with them, and periodically going up to get some kind of water or some kind of oxygen. But there was none there to be had. Well, by Sunday morning, that water had been brought down to just about their upper chest level, to where the Navy SEALs now were able to, most of the time, stay above water and carry the boy through with some slight sedation, carry the boy through. Most importantly, though, was getting through that was the easier part. If we would not have been able to get that kind of U-shape, that narrow flooded passage, that was always the most dangerous part. Because if they would have had to have been submersed going through that area, from what we understood from the governor, that was going to be the most dangerous expedition, and they probably would not have been prepared to try it. Now, in the meantime, again, lesson in leadership was my team on the ground, they know what they're doing. And we've now already airlifted 6 very specific purpose pumps for these kind of applications from Germany. We'd already had those arrive in Chiang Rai, and we were prepared to go in that day, set them up, and within 24 hours, we would have been able to completely drain the entire cave. And they could have walked the boys out at that point. So most people say, well, what were they thinking? The lesson in leadership is this is like a military operation. And the governor of Chiang Rai is fully empowered to make the call. I don't know all the facts that he has. That's not my job. My job and my team's job was to give the governor options. And then he has to make the call. If you go in there as part of a relief effort, and even though you have expertise, and it's all about you, and you're trying to overwhelm or convince somebody, it is very destructive for an operation. Only he had all the facts that he needed to make that call. And so my team was very ticked off. They're upset. They had me on the phone trying to convince the U.S. and Thai military that we could do this, get us 24 hours. And I said, team, you got to stand down, okay? That's not our role. We have given the governor options. We have successfully completed our mission. We knew that if they tried the first boy to get out, or anywhere along the way, and they were to fail, then they would have likely deployed our pumps, and we would have another 24 hours to drain the cave. So that's Sunday. By Sunday evening, we put out an announcement internally that we're involved because it's leaked to the press in London that we've been seen in there. And I didn't want my employees or my colleagues hearing about it somewhere else. So I put the note out Sunday evening from Singapore. The rescue effort had begun, and then by Tuesday, they had finally gotten all 12 of the boys and the coach, and there were 2 medical staff that had been there with the boys the whole time as well. And that was when they were able to claim success. The other thing about leadership goes back to this notion of humility and authenticity. I always say to people all the time, if you're doing the right thing and you're doing good work and you're getting a good result, the people who need to know will know. They need to be advertised. It was never about us. It was about getting the boys and the coach and the medical staff out of the cave. So behind the scene, in very classic Thai fashion, which do not like fanfare, do not like flashy stuff, did not appreciate others grandstanding on the recovery efforts, their support and their friendship and partnership with us and our team as an organization is unbelievable at this point. Because they appreciate that it was never about anybody else other than those boys and the coach and the medical staff. As I reflect on it, and I was telling Dan Aaron this, last night, it isn't a straight line. There were days after this was over where I thought, Patrick, why did you sit there in your hotel room, going to and from lunch and dinner with your wife on your holiday, watching this for 24 hours after you saw they found the boys, and you waited 24 hours before you actually tried to make a phone call to someone? I regret that, because I feel that we got a little bit lucky. If we had not gotten lucky, that would have been a huge regret on my part. And so I also tell people that an element of leadership is 1, reflection afterwards, but it's 2, learning from it and recognizing it. When you believe that you've got a way in which you can help someone else, you do it. You don't wait. You do it immediately. Because it may take you longer to get you through to them than what you think. Because you don't know the state of mind that person's in. Lastly, I would say, before I open it up, I tell people on my team all the time, somebody claims to be a great team player. And I said, I remember whenever I was in Little League baseball, and my coach pulled me aside and said, Patrick, you're not a team player. And I said, well, sure, I heard all the things like, I care as much, if not more, about the team than I do myself. He said, no, you're missing a critical link. You are not a team player unless you care more, if not more, about the success of every other member of your team than you. You don't just jump automatically to the collective, okay? The team is a collection of individuals that you have to care deeply about them more so than you. And I've learned that time and time again, but it's amazing how hard it is for people to embrace that, especially in times of crisis or when the pressure's on. But that's when teams are formed. And I certainly saw the development of this team on the ground in Thailand. They grew immensely over that time. Now to the point where they're now the leaders of our international SWAT team effort that we built over the last few months, that will be marketing externally, that says anytime there is a natural disaster where water is involved, we're the people you can call, and we will galvanize on that. We would never have been able to do that 6 months ago if it wouldn't have been for the experiences that these leaders had in this situation. So that's my story. That's the Thai Cave Rescue. I can talk about anything all afternoon, but I'd love to maybe just pause now and open it up for any questions or comments or observations you guys have.
First off, I just want to talk about the emotional toll it took on your team, because this is a high-stress situation for the boys as well as the people who are part of the rescue effort. So what was it like for the team to think about their actions affect the lives of these boys?
Yeah, it's a great question. The question was, what was the emotional toll on my team on the ground as they were kind of going through this, knowing the pressure and anxiety? I'll try to keep it brief because it's funny. If I'll give you the speed reel of this. I had never met, with a team of 16,900 colleagues, I'd never met 3 of the 5 of the team on the and as much as I travel on the road all the time. So first of all, you can imagine you're getting a phone call from someone saying, I need your 2 best people on the ground in Thailand, coming in from Philadelphia and London immediately. Okay, so they're dropping their families, they're dropping all they're doing, they're getting on a long haul plane. Okay, they arrive in Chiang Rai. It's a long flight where they're coming in from, so they're jet lagged. They've never been to Thailand before, but let's punctuate. They've been instructed that as soon as they land and they're in the van on the way to the cave site, to call me. So now, and this is not about positions or titles or any of that, but it's human nature. You can imagine now I got to call the CEO of the company. I've never met him. He's in Bangkok. Like, why is he there? Oh, look at his wife's time. Oh, okay. So the expectations on them when they're there are no doubt very high. So they get on the phone with me, and they have broken cell reception. There's not good cell coverage in the area. And I can hear they're nervous. And I said, Bobby's from Philadelphia. I said, Bobby, chill, okay? You guys will forget more than anybody at that cave site will ever learn about what you're going there to try to do. So don't feel the weight of the pressure from me, from anybody that you're going to interact with, okay? But secondly, okay, pressure goes up more. I said, you're experiencing Thailand right now in northern Thailand. It ain't good cell reception. I said, it is more likely than not that when you're at the cave site or anywhere in Chiang Rai, you're not going to be able to call me. You are fully empowered and you are fully authorized on behalf of Xylem to do whatever and anything it takes to complete that mission. You could have heard a pin drop if it wasn't for bad cell reception. Yeah, it's like, I'm fully authorized. And I said, Bobby, if you can get me, of course, you can call me. I'll help you out, but you may not be able to reach me. And there were a number of times where they had to make the call when they were on the ground. So that in and of itself is an emotional toll, let alone the fact that they don't speak the language, although there were translators there. And they're in the middle of nowhere. This is not nice conditions that are living in. And that's why, come that Sunday, when our pumps had arrived from Germany and they're ready to go in there, they went to the cave site only to be blocked out. They were so upset, and they called me, and they were very emotional over the phone at that point. And that's when my role was to say, guys, you've done everything you can do. We've given the governor options. You got to let it go. You got to stand down at this point in time. And upon reflection, their comment to me was, Patrick, we were so happy that you said that to us, because in hindsight, we realized how we would have damaged the relationships there if we would have just purely acted on emotion. So at the end of the rescue, all the hoopla's over. Everybody's been moved out. They're closing down the camp, and our guys are still there. And I said, Bobby, when you heading home? Are you doing okay? You have clean clothing? You've been there for more than a week now? He goes, I'm doing fine. He goes, we're leaving tomorrow. And I said, well, how'd you enjoy Thailand? He goes, the cave's great. He goes, the mountain looks beautiful. That's all we saw. And so as a result of that, we are taking them back in November with their families for a full week. We're bringing the 5 together with their spouses. They're going to build a water tower there in that community. And that'll be an opportunity for them to spend a week there and really enjoy Thailand the way that it should be enjoyed. And be able to give back in another way with the water tower. So it was very emotional for them. Yes?
So for your 5 colleagues, what is the educational background of those folks?
That's a great question. It was a diverse team. So and there was a whole group of people, the support apparatus from around the globe. We had a global operation going on behind the scenes on this in England, Switzerland, the US, and Germany. But the main team on the ground, so we had the 2 primary guys, Bobby and Adam. So Bobby's from Philly, Adam's from outside of London. They are mechanical engineers. Their applications background is in hydraulic technology, pumps. They are frontline service technicians. And so they are routinely, Bobby was actually in the Chilean mine rescue. Adam was not, many years ago. And they spend, 70% of the time out in the field, on the road, dewatering different job sites, but mainly in their home countries. But they had been called on before in kind of disaster relief situations. The same for our colleague in Thailand. So his applications background is in rotating equipment around pumping water. The other two gentlemen that were involved were a little bit more senior. He leads all of Southeast Asia for us. And he's actually an electrical engineer, but also has a finance background along the way. And the other guy was a marketing role. So it's an interesting mix of experiences and people on the ground. And again, most of these folks had never met each other before. And so that was a whole nother interesting team dynamic that was going on over time. Yes, sir.
As an international organization, what are some challenges you face working with different groups globally and trying to bridge cultures, like you said, not speaking the language, having to work with partners in London and Singapore, different parts of the world?
Sure. So I will, it's a few things. It's a terrific question. So the question was, what are some of the challenges of running an international business where you have people in different time zones and cultures and languages? The first one's an obvious one. It's time zones. When do you schedule calls? It's very difficult for me. My leadership team is highly distributed, so it's really, really difficult to have a meeting at a time zone that my leader in Australia can be on the same time as my leaders in the U.S. and somebody in Europe. The math doesn't work. So there, you have to the team has to recognize that we have shared sacrifices, so we rotate the meeting times. It seems like a little thing, but it's a big thing. People are tired, Somebody's up at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's not the most effective way. And you can't be flying all over God's creation for meetings. So we do get together 4 times a year face-to-face for a couple of days. But that's one. Communication. And it's not just, it's not as if you're sitting here and one person, maybe their native language is Mandarin and somebody here is German and this person's speaking English, and they're all sitting face-to-face. When you're on a conference call, it's harder to understand what someone's saying in English because you don't have any of the benefit of the body language, fill in the gaps. You don't know kind of what their facial expressions are. But two, especially we here in the U.S. as Americans, we don't appreciate how many acronyms, colloquialisms that we use, little cute phrases, sports analogies, that many of our friends and colleagues outside the U.S. have no idea what we're talking about. And we tend to talk really fast, especially when a bunch of people that are U.S.-based are in a conference room. And when you're listening in, you got a microphone in the conference room, if you're dialing in the outside, all you hear is noise going on. And it's hard to follow. These seem like really tactical things, but they build up. And more importantly, they're totally within our control to manage. But you as a leader have to be sensitive to that. And that's why I benefit greatly from having spent so many of my years living outside the U.S. or living away from head office, out in the field. You understand what it feels like to not be included at certain times. The more strategic challenges are the relative importance placed on time differs dramatically by culture. So you may think that you have alignment on an initiative or a priority, but making sure everybody's aligned on what's the time frame. And it isn't always speed, okay? Speed can sometimes be a problem. People want to rush to the answer, and they leave a whole bunch of people behind. So what I always say alignment is the single most important underrated success factor for a leader. It's hard to get. It takes longer than what you want it to do. But until you get it, whatever you think that you want the organization to go achieve, it ain't going to happen. It won't be sustainable. So you have to take the efforts to make sure that you have alignment around that. And that's painful. And it's harder in an international organization because of different importance on time. And then I would say lastly, anytime you're an international organization, by definition, you have people in a lot of countries, and they all have their priorities. And how you make sure that your goals and priorities as a leader have cascaded all the way down to the front line, whether it be the sales team, the factory, the marketing team in France versus Japan versus Scottsdale, Arizona at a service location, that's hard. because you get a lot of leaders in middle management that sometimes kind of want to go do their own thing. So you have to have processes in place that structure that. But even then, unless you want to operate in a police state, which I have no desire to do, you have to deal with some of that complexity and ambiguity. It's the biggest challenge, it's also the most fun.
So when you were a student at IU, what's one thing that you wish you were, that you know now that you wish you would have known then?
Yeah, that's a great question. There'd be more than one, but I'll I think when I was here, and I was sitting in the chair of many of you here, I probably felt and took on way too much anxiety and pressure, thinking that I had to have it all figured out. I had to know exactly what I wanted to do, that I had to feel there was a straight line to what it was going to be, that whatever primary majors or focus areas that I had chosen, I had to get that right because that was going to be the path. And I probably didn't listen enough to people at that time who were my age, that pretty much whatever you think you're going to end up doing, that's not where you're going to be. But that's not the point. The point is that I would leave you all with on that question is it doesn't mean you don't need to have goals. And it's not about not working hard. But it's, first of all, building a toolkit, okay? Building skills and experiences. And one of the things that one of my mentors told me early on was, Patrick, rather than you trying to figure out what you want to be doing by the time you're, pick a really old age, 40 or 50, rather than doing that, focus more on what experiences do you want to have had by the time you get there. Because life is not a dress rehearsal. Okay? Like John Lennon said, life is what happens when you're planning for it. So, don't let these precious moments in time go by focusing on the wrong thing. Two, I would say I probably would have had, faculty will close their ears here, I would have had more fun. I had a great time. I had a lot of fun. But I would say I probably spent a few too many hours in the library. I don't want to encourage any of you not to study, but be efficient and focused on when you're studying. Make it productive use of your time. And I think what you're going to find as you get older is managing your time and energy is the single most important thing that you can do to be happy and successful in life. If you're just running from one thing to the next, that usually doesn't end well. You've got to make sure that you've got a good, healthy balance in your life with multiple interests. And boy, are you all blessed to be here on this campus. Because to me, as phenomenal as the Kelley Business School is, I was a huge fan. Look at what you have around you here on this campus. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I can assure you that is something that many other business schools do not have access to. So make sure that you don't live on an island here, and that you are taking advantage of and engaging with a diverse group of people that are outside this building as well. Because you're only going to be here for a certain amount of time. And it's going to fly by very, very fast. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned multiple times how for Xylem was a priority of doing the right thing and not trying to take advantage of the situation like some companies might have been trying to do. But when something like this is a success, what are some tips you have for going about taking credit for it in a humble and modest way?
That's a great question. I don't know that I have the perfect answer for it. I can tell you kind of how we're thinking about it right now. So we generally have a policy. It's a position on this coming from me, obviously, to start is we don't talk about things like this until they're done. So let's not bring the attention on us because we happen to be there. Now that's not always possible to keep from happening. And certainly as we get more visible and active in these efforts, that'll become even more challenging. But you know that fine line. You know when you see it as to when somebody's kind of showboating and kind of marketing it, and it's a judgment call. But you kind of have to trust your gut on these things. And then two, what we try to do is more afterwards is to inform people of, because a lot of people when they see these things, it was funny. I didn't mention it earlier, but we signed up this. We are now the official global water technology partner of Manchester City Football Club, and of course by having that, it's New York City Football Club as well because they own it now. And one of their legend players came to Singapore when we were announcing the partnership of Man City and Xylem, and so, fantastic. Well, that was the morning that it was announced that the boys had been rescued, and that some of the word had come out at this big water conference that we had 5 people on the ground that were there doing this. So Jolyon is the player. So Jolyon, we had a video footage of some of what you saw here, but it's VR. And so he was experiencing in VR about 5 minutes of a lot of what you've seen here and on the ground kind of things. And when he took the VR off, he was crying. He had tears in his eyes. He said, "Patrick, I had no idea." He goes, "You're a listed company, right? It's a UK version for a public company." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I had no idea that for-profit companies do this." And I said, "Jolyon, we're not the only one that does it." But I said, "Yeah, it's not that common." And he said, "This is powerful. You've got to get this message out." He goes, "Can I take one of these VR back to the first team locker room in Man City?" He said, "Because these guys are going to want to go out and build water towers." Well, that was the whole reason for the partnership with Man City, was to get the players involved in what we're doing, and that will create awareness amongst youth. So there are different ways that we will go about doing it, but I just want to make sure we never get involved in hype. When my wife heard, who Dan and I know very well, she's Thai. She studied in the UK for many years. She's lived in the US now for almost 15 years. We've been married for 16. And so when she heard that I was coming out here and I was going to be telling the story, she said, "But you've promised me that this is never about Xylem. This whole thing was never about," because throughout the whole process, she was always very adamant with me that you don't say anything until it's over, okay? So she was good. She was a good check and balance for me as well to keep me grounded along the way. And I told her, I can rest assured, this is not about marketing anything other than lessons through the experience of what to do and what not to do. Not a great answer to your question, because I don't know that I have the answer yet, but it's a work in progress. Yes, sir.
Quite recently, you wired the belly to a very bullish bet on your company. I was wondering what kind of principles, not only cultural but also financial, that you try to implement to attract such great investors and capital. So they have in other words, what do you offer as the catalyst that they see to invest in your company?
I won't put Dan on the spot. He's been selling us Stellantis. So it's a great question. So there are, I'd say let me shift back to the economic value side for a moment, because at the end of the day, that, from an investor standpoint, that still reigns supreme, although that too is, we're bringing in new sets of investors in the whole ESG movement. But I would say what investors are most attracted to, I think, in our story thus far is the acceleration in growth that we've had. And that's really been the result of a number of the acquisitions that we've done to get more into the technology side, more of the software and data analytics side of the water sector versus purely equipment. Hardware is important, but you can't live only as a hardware company. So that's driven pretty attractive top line growth. Two, we still are working towards some pretty significant profitability targets in terms of improving our profitability margins, and they find that element of it to be attractive. And then I think third, there is the notion of, are we going to be a company that continues to deploy capital? Because we generate a lot of cash flow. And so are we going to be a company that continues to deploy that capital in things like acquisitions for growth smart and be disciplined, not overpay for things? And so I think, and then there's also always a little bit of a scarcity premium for the water sector, which in my view is not deserved. Just because you're a water company does not mean that you're going to be growing or be profitable. It's littered with companies that are not successful in that regard. So we always try to bring them back to the fundamentals and not get caught up on the whole water story too much. Having said that, I saw something, you guys probably know this. We had one of our interns this past summer who did some research for us. If I get it right, it's estimated over the course of the next 12 to 15 years that $38 trillion of value, biggest transfer of wealth in history, is going to be transferred from baby boomers to millennials. 38 trillion. I mean, pick a number, okay? North of 30 trillion. It's a big number. The survey suggests that of the baby boomers, roughly a third say that environmental sustainability, governance, social responsibility is important in their investment decisions. Millennials, 78% say it's important. So you see this huge buildup of ESG funds. It was always popular in Europe. It's growing more popular in the US. Is because their investors are expecting them to put that money to work.
What's ESG?
So ESG is an industry name for environmental sustainable governance. So it's basically it's a way of measuring a company as to are they only focused on profit at the neglect of the environment, of sustainability, of good governance, or is that also important to them? And there are a number of indices that are out there that are used to rate companies on that. Now, we score already quite high on that, but we're not visible yet to a number of the funds that are out there that are going to be spending this money. So we're doing a lot right now to begin to market that, because it's not just about these stories. That's about good governance, good controls, ethics, all the environment, all those things that are important to that group of investors. But stock price is only a reflection of future cash flows, as you well know. So, those stock prices are there because they expect us to continue to deliver on what we say we're going to do.
Kind of piggybacking on the last two questions, is there any pressure or, I guess, pressure from the board of directors that encourage you to have a timeline in how you can make yourself use a situation, a story like this, and captivate the entire world, and be a little more marketable, or I guess in the eyes of the ESG, those groups?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say, and that's a real-time conversation. So I just came in last night. We just had our last board meeting the last couple of days in New York, and we spent a lot of time talking about ESG investing and what our strategy is, et cetera. I would say on things like the Thai cave rescue, and specifically that, I had notified the board as we were in the operations, for any reason, just to let them know, because I knew they'd be wondering, even like a lot of our colleagues, when my note fund went out on that Sunday evening, I was inundated with emails, more so than any other note I've ever sent out to all of our people, because so many of them were, not only were they and their families proud, but they were worried because they hadn't heard from me. Why are we not involved in this? Okay, so there was, that's also part of leadership, is you don't go for the popular vote. You do it with a purpose in mind. And so I got a little bit of the board too. So they're like, well, why aren't you saying something? Why aren't we? I said, because we're not doing this for marketing. Okay, this is not about Xylem. I got a little bit of that from a couple of directors, but they quickly understood and said, okay, we get it. Now, after we've been involved in a number of these other efforts, and they see that growing, and they hear the stats that I talked about in terms of ESG investing, they're very interested and very much pushing me now. What's the strategy with the? It's good. I mean, it's no idea. So, advice I got. This is another lesson in leadership. Is first of all, people think that whenever you become CEO, that like you got it. You're the boss. You control everything. You just you might get away with that. Like my first week on the job, I'm walking around our corporate offices they had moved into like 6 months earlier, and all these conference rooms, but they didn't have numbers or labels, and so I'm trying to figure out like where the meeting is. And I just happened to say in passing, well, why don't we put a number or a name of the conference? Well, like within 2 hours they were numbered. I was like, wow, that felt pretty good. That's about where it stops. So, one of my former bosses, he was the chair of Taekwondo International, Ed Bree, fantastic creator of value. He said to me, Patrick, you'll learn quickly that no idea is a good idea until it's the board's idea. We all have bosses, and we're all human. And so leading people through the process of discovery to where it becomes their idea is part of change management. That's how you get people buying into the message so that by the time they bought in, they forgot how much time's already gone by and they want done like tomorrow. And so that's a good place for us to be with the board now, is they're fully aligned around the importance. Now, it can't all be feel-good stuff. I mean, you got to deliver on all these other elements, but that's what we get paid to do anyway. The harder part is how you do all this other great social value creation. And that's why people want to come work in organizations like that have a higher purpose, and people want to do business with companies that have a higher purpose. And that, in my view, is not a trend. So that's not a fad. That is a sustainable trend, and that's being driven, in my view, by your generation. Yes.
You mentioned a little bit that you have a wife, and she seems to support you a lot, but how do you balance your professional life and your home life?
It's a great question. So I'd say another little tidbit I would leave you with, and I'll tell you how I do it, but I have a great analogy. Maybe this analogy has been used and you've heard this already by now. So I think I always said it's not until you've actually repeated somebody else's comment 7 times that you can't claim it to be your own, but I still don't claim it to be my own. And I think it was A.J. Lefley at Procter & Gamble when he was there was giving advice to a group that I've been a part of on work-life balance. And he said, I can't give you advice on how you manage your work-life balance. He said, because work-life balance is different for everyone, and it differs for you over time. But he said, the way I would look at it is all of the trade-offs, all the choices that you're having to make on where you spend your time in a moment or overtime are balls that you're juggling in the air. Some of those balls are made of rubber. You can neglect that one and drop it. It'll bounce back up at some point in time and you can grab it later. Some are made of glass. You drop them, they shatter, and you can't put them back together again. So he said, always be thinking when you're making those trade-offs, is it a rubber ball or is it a glass ball? And only you make that call. Nobody else can make it for you. So for me, the only big glass ball that I have is my wife. But it's also other things that I want to give my time to. Charity, engaging with students. There's some of those things that I always want to do. My wife and I, we build water towers every year in Thailand. We do this on our own. So every year, it's religious. I'm out for 2.5 to 3 weeks. I'm going to be in Asia. I get 4 weeks vacation. I spend 3 of them from second week of December through first week of January. We have property there. I go there. I check out. People know where to get me if they have to. But it also sends an important message to the organization that it's okay to check out. Okay? It's okay to find that balance. I travel a lot. That's my biggest trade-off. I love travel, but I travel too much. So whenever I'm home, weekday evenings and weekends are sacred. Unless there's some major, obviously leading a company, some major thing comes up, but it's got to be major. And what you learn over time is that the reason why people get distracted and get sucked into everything is because they think they have to be in everything. And they don't delegate. And when you don't delegate, you don't develop. You don't develop people, you don't develop yourself. And so I was told several years ago, Patrick, at the end of the day, while you could get involved in anything and everything, you really have to think long and hard about what are those things that only you can make the decision on. Therefore, you have to be involved versus somebody else wants you involved or you want to be involved, because every one of those suck up your time. And do you really have to be involved? Is it really going to move the needle? And so as a result of that, I would just say to any of you, it's a personal choice. Weekends are sacred, weekday evenings sacred, and I love music. So, you know, music is my therapy, and I have music with me at all times. Hey, Brian. He's going to come and do comedy routine. So Brian was my college roommate. I think last night was the first time he's ever been to business school in his entire tenure at Indiana. He's in the communications side, and Brian's claim to fame, and he is the most humble guy. That's why he's sitting over there way back in the corner. Many of you may or may not know, so he was with Conan O'Brien for many years as a lead writer there, and did a lot of the skits that you can go Google him on, and you'll see a whole plethora. I always say anytime you have a Wikipedia page, you've done something. But now he's one of the lead writers for Stephen Colbert in New York, and so Brian had a great talk with a couple hundred of your colleagues last night, and the topic was on mental anxiety, depression, how you deal with stress along the way, because I think many of you assume that when you look at us at our age and you see where we are, that it must have been a straight line, and that everything's just great, because nobody posts bad stuff on social media. It's always good. Well, we're here to let you know that it ain't a straight line, okay? Don't put that pressure on yourself. I always say one great line that I heard about 2 months ago in a book called A Leadership Kick in the Ass. It's a great book. Go Google it. It's called A Leadership Kick in the Ass. And the prologue to the book has the general manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And he says, there are two kinds of leaders in the world. Those that have been humble and those that are about to be. And that's a fact. And so any of you that think that we haven't, any of you that think that we haven't been humbled and haven't made mistakes and screwed up along the way, I can assure you that that's not the case. And that is what drives the humility and understanding and awareness that we all have a role to play.
So, are we good? So I want to give you a couple of things. So I came down, first of all. I want to say one thing though, since I've met Patrick, thank you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Swag, we're going to give a little swag. Known you a couple of years. I think when I first met him, I'd never heard of Xylem. And I looked it up on the stock exchange. It was in the low 40s. It's been up to high 82.
Not now. Not with last week's markets, but.
But that shows you can do multiple things. You can try to save water, solve water's problem, and be profitable at the same time, and that's pretty incredible. Because I've only known him for 2 years.
Well, it's a team sport, as you know. So
there's the humble man.
There's 17,000 people out there doing it. So
we just want to say thank you. We want you to know how much we appreciate not just all that you do for our school, but how you represent us. We think it makes a huge difference, and the idea of a social impact that the company has and that you have personally says volumes about who we are as Kelley students and as Kelley alums, and we thank you for that.
Well, you know that coming from you means a lot to me. So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That plaque is Fortune 500's top 50 for 2018, changing the world. Companies that are changing the world.
So yeah, we came in 7th. Our goal is to get to number 1, but again, it's not about us. So as long as we make the impact. Thank you all very, very much. I appreciate your time.